All right, everyone, get ready for a deep dive. We're taking on the Ottoman Empire today.
Over 6 centuries.
Yeah, they were around for a long time. 6 centuries of history. We're using the Echoes of the Crescent podcast series to guide us, and
It's a fascinating one.
it really is. Buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride.
Absolutely. And one of the things that makes the Ottomans so interesting is just how dramatically they transformed.
Yeah.
They start as this tiny little state in Anatolia.
Right.
Anatolia, by the way, for those who don't know, is modern-day Turkey. And from these really humble beginnings, they rise to become this global powerhouse.
It's incredible. It's like the ultimate underdog story, right? Like, how did they manage to pull off such a massive power move?
Well, I think it all boils down to strategy. Early Ottoman leaders were incredibly strategic. They were brilliant, both militarily and politically. They had this knack for knowing when to fight and when to negotiate.
So it wasn't just about brute force.
Not at all. No, they were masters of diplomacy. They understood that building an empire requires as much finesse as it does force. You need to know who to befriend, who to make alliances with, just as much as you need to know who to conquer.
Smart.
Yeah, and they were really good at exploiting the weaknesses of their enemies.
Like, how so?
Well, for example, they were able to leverage dissatisfaction within the Byzantine Empire to their advantage.
Ah, so they were playing the long game.
Yeah, absolutely. They were thinking several steps ahead. It's almost like they were playing 4D chess while everyone else was stuck playing checkers.
I love that analogy. Okay, so we can't talk about the Ottomans without mentioning the fall of Constantinople in 1453.
I was waiting for you to bring that up.
This is like History 101 stuff, right? Everyone knows it was a major turning point. But refresh your memories. Why was it such a big deal?
Well, think about it. Constantinople was the heart of the Byzantine Empire.
For centuries, yeah.
It had withstood countless sieges.
It was considered basically unconquerable, right?
Pretty much, yeah. And so when Mehmed II, also known as Mehmed the Conqueror, finally took the city, it sent shockwaves throughout the world.
Yeah, I mean, this is the guy who literally changed the map. How did he manage to pull off what seemed impossible?
Well, part of it was technology.
Okay.
The Ottomans had developed these incredibly powerful cannons.
I've seen pictures of those, yeah.
Oh yeah, massive things. Cannons that could blast through even the legendary walls of Constantinople.
Walls that had stood for over 1,000 years.
Exactly, suddenly vulnerable to this new technology.
It's a classic example of how technology can just completely rewrite the rules of the game, right?
Yeah, I mean, who knows how history might have unfolded differently if the Ottomans hadn't had those cannons.
Right. It's mind-blowing to think about.
But it wasn't just technology. I mean, Mehmed II was also a brilliant strategist.
Like, what kind of strategy are we talking about?
He didn't just lay siege to the city, he completely cut it off.
Oh, wow.
Blockaded the port, cut off supply lines, just completely choked the city.
So he was playing the long game there, too.
It was. He was very patient and very methodical.
That's wild. And, of course, the fall of Constantinople wasn't just another city falling.
Oh, no.
It was symbolic.
It was the end of an era. It marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, an empire that had lasted for over 1,000 years. And it signaled the rise of the Ottoman Empire as a major player on the world stage.
It's like the changing of the guard, almost.
Absolutely. A huge shift in global power.
So this sets the stage for what's considered the golden age of the Ottomans.
Exactly. And at the heart of this golden age is a figure who needs no introduction. Suleiman the Magnificent.
I mean, you know a ruler has made an impact when they get a title like the Magnificent attached to their name.
No kidding. And Suleiman really earned that title. His reign in the 16th century is considered the peak of Ottoman power and influence. Under his leadership, the empire expanded its territory, reformed its legal system, and experienced this incredible cultural flourishing that continues to inspire people even today.
So what was it about Suleiman that made him so magnificent?
Well, for one, he was a brilliant military leader. Under his command, the Ottoman armies pushed deep into Europe, conquering Belgrade, taking Rhodes from the Knights Hospitaller.
Wow.
He even laid siege to Vienna. And while that siege ultimately failed, it still sent shockwaves through Europe.
I can imagine. I mean, that's like knocking on the door of the Habsburg Empire, right?
Exactly. It really was a clash of civilizations. The Ottomans, under Suleiman, represented this powerful force that seemed almost unstoppable.
It must have felt like the whole world was watching to see what they would do next.
Oh, absolutely. But Suleiman wasn't just about military might.
Okay.
He also understood the importance of a strong legal system.
Like the foundation of a good empire.
Precisely. He overhauled the entire Ottoman legal code, aiming to create a more just and efficient system.
That's a big undertaking.
It was. And on top of all that, he was a huge patron of the arts.
So he wasn't just a conqueror and a lawgiver, he was a Renaissance man.
Yeah, very much so. And under his rule, Ottoman architecture, in particular, reached new heights. Think of the iconic mosques designed by Mimar Sinan.
Like the Suleimani Mosque in Istanbul.
Exactly. It's a masterpiece.
When you see pictures of those mosques, it's just breathtaking.
And what's really interesting about Ottoman art and architecture is that it wasn't just one style. They were masters of blending influences, taking inspiration from Islamic, Persian, and even Byzantine traditions.
So a real melting pot.
Exactly. And that cultural fusion wasn't limited to architecture either. It influenced everything, from literature and music to even cuisine.
I'm thinking about Turkish coffee and baklava right now.
Oh yeah, delicious.
So it wasn't just about military and political power. They were shaping culture, too. It sounds like a pretty potent combination.
It was. And this is also the time when the Ottoman sultans take on the title of caliph.
Oh, yeah, the caliphate. Now, that's a whole other layer to this story, right? What does that even mean, to be caliph?
Well, basically, it means being recognized as the spiritual leader of the entire Muslim world.
Whoa. So now they're not just managing an empire, they're leading a vast religious community.
It's a huge responsibility. And it wasn't just symbolic.
Right.
It came with real political and religious power. It positioned the Ottomans as defenders of the faith, a symbol of unity for Muslims across the globe.
Talk about pressure.
No kidding.
Yeah.
But you know what's remarkable? They handled it pretty well, at least for a time. They became the last great caliphate, wielding influence over vast swaths of the Islamic world.
So here we have the Ottomans at their peak, expanding their empire, engaging in epic battles, fostering this incredible cultural growth, and leading the Muslim world. It's almost hard to grasp the scale of their achievements.
It really is a remarkable period in history.
Yeah.
But of course, as with all empires, their power couldn't last forever. Even during this golden age, there were cracks beginning to show.
The classic rise and fall.
Yeah.
So when do we start to see those first signs of trouble? What starts to chip away at this seemingly invincible empire?
Well, things start to get shaky in the 17th century. Yeah, you start to see the Ottomans facing some, serious challenges. Internal struggles, economic troubles,
Right.
and a string of military losses that really kind of dent their image of invincibility.
Yeah, the podcast specifically points to the Battle of Lepanto and the Treaty of Karlowitz as real turning points.
Yeah, they're huge.
I have to admit, I wasn't super familiar with those before diving into this, so why were those so significant?
Well, I think they represent the beginning of the Ottomans' decline in Europe,
Okay.
like the beginning of their retreat from Europe.
Yeah.
So the Battle of Lepanto, that happens in 1571.
Okay.
It's a major naval defeat against a coalition of European powers, and it's a real shock to the system.
Like their first taste of defeat.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, they'd lost battles before,
Right.
but this one felt different. It was like suddenly the Ottoman Navy, which had been considered almost unbeatable,
Right.
it wasn't so invincible after all.
So that first crack in the armor.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the Treaty of Karlowitz, which comes later in 1699, and this treaty forces the Ottomans to give up significant territory for the first time.
Oh, wow. So this isn't just losing a battle, this is losing land.
Yeah, they lose control of Hungary, Transylvania, parts of Croatia.
Land they'd held for centuries, right?
Yeah, exactly. So this was a big deal.
I bet. That must have been a huge blow, not just to their power, but also to their, reputation, right?
No, absolutely. It's like
Yeah.
suddenly the Ottomans aren't expanding anymore. They're shrinking.
Right, and their enemies are probably taking note.
Oh, yeah, big time.
It's like that saying, nature abhors a vacuum. Someone's going to step in and fill that void.
Exactly. And these losses, they kind of start a domino effect. It weakens their economy, emboldens their rivals, and just kind of throws them off balance.
So the aura of invincibility is starting to fade.
Big time. But it's not just external pressures that are causing problems, right?
Okay, so what's happening internally?
Well, for one thing, the empire had gotten really big really fast. I mean, think about it. They controlled territory across 3 continents. That's a lot to manage.
Yeah, I can imagine the logistics alone would be a nightmare.
It was just too much to handle effectively.
So overexpansion.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you have corruption creeping into the Ottoman bureaucracy.
The age-old problem of corruption.
Yep. And their military which had once been this, like, incredibly efficient and innovative fighting force,
Right.
it starts to become less so.
So they're getting bloated and inefficient.
Yeah, basically. And at the same time, Europe is undergoing this massive transformation with the scientific revolution and the industrial revolution
Okay.
and the Ottomans. They're kind of stuck in their old ways. They're slow to
Uh,
adapt to these new ideas and technologies.
so they're falling behind technologically and economically.
Yeah, and that gap, it just keeps widening.
Not good. So are they just sitting back and watching this happen? Or are they trying to do something about it?
Well, they do try to modernize. You have the Tanzimat reforms, which start in the 19th century.
Okay.
This is a series of attempts to, like, drag the Ottoman state and society into the modern era.
Okay, and what kinds of reforms are we talking about?
Well, they introduced new legal codes,
Huh?
revamped the education system.
So pretty significant changes.
Oh, yeah, they even experimented with a parliamentary system.
So trying to catch up with Europe in terms of ideas and institutions.
Exactly. But it's a mixed bag.
How so?
Well, some of the reforms are successful, but others are met with a lot of resistance, particularly from traditionalist factions within the empire.
So you have this tension between tradition and progress.
Yeah, and it's a tension that ultimately weakens the empire even further.
It's like they're trying to fix a leaky boat while still arguing about which way to sail.
A perfect analogy. And then, of course, you have the big one, World War I.
The war to end all wars. Talk about a game changer.
Right. And for the Ottomans, it's the beginning of the end.
So how do they get dragged into this global conflict?
Well, they make the fateful decision to side with the Central Powers.
Germany and Austria-Hungary?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a gamble that didn't pay off.
What were they hoping to gain by siding with them?
Well, it's complicated. I think they saw the Central Powers as a counterbalance to Russian expansionism.
Which had been a problem for them for a while.
Yeah, for centuries. And they also probably hoped to gain some concessions from their allies
Yeah.
if they won.
So a strategic calculation, but a risky one.
Very risky. And as the war drags on, it becomes clear that they're on the losing side.
And this loss leads to the dismantling of the Ottoman Empire. Right?
Yeah, the empire is officially dissolved in 1922.
The end of an era. But before we get to the aftermath, there's another dark chapter we need to address. The Armenian genocide.
Yeah, it's a sensitive topic, but it's an important one.
Absolutely. We can't talk about the fall of the Ottoman Empire without acknowledging this tragedy, so what can you tell us about it?
Well, between 1915 and 1923, during World War I, a large number of Armenians living within the Ottoman Empire were killed or deported.
And this was orchestrated by the Ottoman government.
Yes. The Ottoman government claimed that Armenians were collaborating with their enemy, Russia, and posed a threat to national security.
So using the war as a pretext.
Sadly, yes. And the consequences were horrific. Many Armenians were forced on death marches into the Syrian desert, where they died from starvation, disease, or violence.
Just awful.
Yeah, it was a systematic attempt to eliminate the Armenian population within the empire.
And the exact number of victims is still disputed, right?
It is. It's hard to get accurate figures, but most historians agree that hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Armenians were killed.
It's just heartbreaking. A real stain on the legacy of the Ottoman Empire.
Absolutely. It's a reminder of the horrors that can happen when nationalism and intolerance run amok.
And it's something that continues to have a profound impact on how we understand this period of history.
For sure. But amidst all this tragedy, you also have the Arab Revolt, which starts in 1916.
Okay, so this is happening at the same time as World War I.
Yep. It's a rebellion against Ottoman rule in the Arabian Peninsula.
So the Ottomans are fighting a war on one front and dealing with a rebellion on another?
Yeah, they're getting squeezed from all sides.
That's rough. What were the motivations behind the Arab Revolt?
Well, Arab nationalists had been pushing for independence for a while.
Okay.
And during World War I, they saw an opportunity.
I see. So they allied themselves with the British, right?
Exactly. And with British support, they were able to successfully challenge Ottoman rule.
So yet another factor contributing to the empire's decline.
Absolutely. It's like everything is unraveling at once.
And from the ashes of the Ottoman Empire, a new figure emerges. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the father of modern Turkey.
Yeah, Ataturk is a fascinating figure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he basically created Turkey as we know it today.
He did. He was a brilliant military commander who played a key role in the Turkish War of Independence after World War I.
So a new nation rises from the ruins.
Exactly. And Ataturk's vision for Turkey was a radical departure from the Ottoman past.
In what way?
Well, he established a secular republic, abolished the caliphate, and implemented all these reforms aimed at modernizing Turkish society.
So a clean break from the old ways.
Yeah, very much so. He was determined to create a new Turkey, one that was modern, secular, and aligned with the West.
Wow. It's an incredible story of resilience and reinvention. Out of the collapse of one empire, a new nation is born.
It really is. And Ataturk's legacy is still felt very strongly in Turkey today.
So, we've traced the Ottoman Empire from its humble beginnings to its peak of power and influence, and finally to its dramatic collapse. It's been quite a journey.
It has. But the story doesn't end there.
Right, because even though the empire is gone, its impact continues to be felt today.
Exactly. The Ottomans left behind a rich and complex legacy that still shapes the world in many ways.
So, what are some of the ways that legacy lives on? How can we see those echoes of the Ottomans in the 21st century?
Well, when an empire spans over 6 centuries like that, it's bound to leave behind a lot of influences,
Oh, yeah, for
a
sure.
real lasting impact. And I think with the Ottomans, you see it like not just in the big historical events, but in the everyday lives of people.
So, it's like woven into the fabric of society.
Exactly. It's in the architecture, the food, the language.
So, give us some concrete examples. Like, how do we see these echoes of the Ottomans in the world today?
Okay, so let's start with architecture. I mean, you go to cities like Istanbul, Sarajevo, Cairo,
Yeah.
even parts of Eastern Europe, and you
Mm.
can still see the influence of Ottoman architectural styles.
It's true. Those mosques, those palaces.
Yeah, and the bridges.
They're just stunning.
And they're not just beautiful, they're like tangible links to the past,
Yeah, you can almost feel the history when you stand in those places.
Exactly. And it's not just the big monumental buildings either.
Okay.
The Ottomans also influenced like urban planning and everyday architecture.
Really?
Yeah, think about those bustling marketplaces, the intricate tile work you see,
Oh, yeah, I love
the
that.
graceful arches.
It's like stepping back in time.
It is. And the
Yeah.
cultural influences go way beyond architecture, too.
Okay, like what?
Well, they had rich traditions of music, literature, cuisine.
I'm thinking about Turkish coffee right now.
Oh,
Baklava,
those flavors, they're like a direct link to the Ottoman world.
they really are. Food is such a visceral way to connect with the past, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the Ottomans were masters of like culinary fusion,
Oh, yeah.
blending influences from all over their empire.
So they were a global society in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And they played a huge role in shaping global trade, too.
Right, because of their location, right.
Exactly. They were right at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa.
Prime real estate.
No kidding. They controlled key trade routes, facilitated the flow of goods, ideas, people.
So they weren't just passive recipients of global culture. They were actively shaping it.
Yeah, very much so. And their influence extended to language, too.
Okay, how so?
Well, Turkish, the official language of the empire,
Yeah.
borrowed words and phrases
Yeah.
from Arabic, Persian, even Slavic languages.
So a real melting pot of languages, too.
Exactly, reflecting the multicultural nature of the empire.
It's amazing how these connections, these echoes, persist even today.
Yeah, it's like this hidden layer of history that we're still uncovering.
I love that idea. So much more to learn, right?
Always.
Well, this deep dive has been incredible. I knew the Ottomans were important, but I never realized just how far their influence reached.
Yeah, they're often overlooked, but they really did play a pivotal role in shaping the world we live in today.
So where does this leave us? I mean, we've covered a lot of ground here. The rise of the Ottomans, their golden age, their decline and fall.
And their legacy.
Right. What are the big takeaways?
Well, I think one thing we've seen is that history isn't just a bunch of dates and events. It's a process.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing conversation. And the story of the Ottomans, it reminds us that the past is always present, shaping our world in ways we might not even realize.
It's like those ripples spreading out from a stone dropped in a pond.
Exactly. And I think it also challenges us to think critically about power, culture, and, the lasting impact of empires.
Right. Empires may rise and fall, but their legacies endure.
They do. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Ottoman Empire,
Yeah.
we leave you with this question. How do you think the world would be different today if this empire had never existed?
Oh, that's a good one.
What would be missing from our global culture, our political landscape, even our everyday lives?
It's a question worth pondering, for sure.
It is.
And on that note, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, keep discovering the fascinating world of history. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.